So the starting point of my work, which indeed led to a PhD that I defended in December 2020, was that the internationalization of society over the last century has promoted the idea of a global community aspiring to common human rights and values. Now, it is in that context of evolution of human rights that child trafficking was consolidated as an international legal category in 2000 with the UN Palermo Protocol. And the majority of countries in the world have adapted this definition in their national law. Regional regimes have emerged with the aim of harmonizing legislation and fostering cooperation between states. However, 20 years after this effervescence in favor of anti-trafficking policies, I noted that we were largely faced with a failure. While many laws and public policies have been created or are still being created, few children have been lifted out of trafficking, even less so in a sustainable way. So for me, this raised the question of what is at work for these children as they become subjects of governance and objects of control. It also raises questions on what affects the legal norm of child trafficking and the policies and the institutions that flow from it have on the children that they are meant to protect. So my study analyzes the contemporary effects of anti-trafficking policies on children trafficked for labor in the EU and ASEAN. And this notion of studying the effects on child traffickees is not so much dealt with in political science due to the assumption that, by necessity, anti-trafficking policies protect children. So I explored different dimensions of private and public apparatus through which the governmentality of child trafficking manifests itself at regional and at interregional level. And through this, I explored correlate questions linked, first of all, to the diffusion of the child trafficking norm between and within regions and stakeholders. Secondly, linked to the criminalization and the vulnerabilization of child traffickees. And thirdly, linked to the private governance of anti-trafficking initiatives, in particular concerning social sustainability on business supply chains. So to build my case study, I drew on field work that I conducted over the course of almost 4 years, so from 2016 to 2020, with government, police, justice, civil society, multilateral organizations, and businesses in the European Union and Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And the analysis of the data that I gathered over that period leads me to argue that child traffickees are subjected not only to physical and psychological violence linked to their exploitation, but also, borrowing on Johan Galtung's concept, to structural violence, which is produced by the economic, political, and social structures on which institutions rest and which aim at protecting them. So in my conclusions, by deconstructing the problematic elements of the child trafficking norm and of anti-trafficking practices, which structurally drive the vulnerabilization of children instead of their protection, I provide suggestions on alternative conceptualizations and applications of the child trafficking norms, which could contribute to better long-term empowerment of child trafficking survivors. Now, I think I'm just within the time limit, but I just wanted to stress that it's a critical moment for these topics as grounds are moving and stakes are also very high, as we can see with the pandemic crisis and crises such as the war in Ukraine, which pushes what we can call distress migration and increases flows of trafficking. We also have an interesting window of opportunity with new legislative and policy initiatives emerging, and especially with the EU legiferating at the moment on human rights in business environments. So there is a lot of potential and traction to get the ball moving on this question and have better protection systems in place. Thank you.